The station hung in the black like a slow, patient eye, watching the traffic of 100 alien ships pass through the trade lanes near the edge of known space. Inside its glass halls, under lights that never dimmed, a young man named Danny Ruiz sat at the end of a long table, listening to people who did not think he mattered. He was human, he was from Earth, and in this room that meant almost nothing. The council chamber on the outpost was small compared to the grand one on the Crown World, but it still made Danny feel like an insect under glass. Around him sat delegates from 6 different species, their skin in colors no human painter could mix, their voices coming out as clicks, hums, and low growls that the translators in his ear turned into cold, careful words. At the head of the table sat a delegate named Vale Antrix, a tall being with silver-gray skin and eyes like polished stone. Vale did not look at Danny when he spoke. He looked past him, the way someone looks past a chair. "The system in question," Vale said, "has been reassigned. Earth's claim, while noted, was never formally recognized under council law." Danny felt his jaw tighten. He kept his hands flat on the table because he had learned in 3 years of sitting in rooms like this that showing anger only made the others more confident. "That system was surveyed and claimed by human engineers 2 years ago," he said. "We have the records. We filed them the proper way." "Records can be filed," Vale said, "but recognition must be earned. Your species is young. Your paperwork does not change that." A soft round of agreement moved through the room, more clicks, more hums. Danny looked around at faces that were not cruel exactly, just tired of pretending to care. To them, Earth was a small, loud newcomer, a planet full of clever animals who had figured out how to build spaceships but had not yet figured out their place in the order of things. They did not hate humans. They simply did not think about humans very much at all. That was the part that stung the most. Danny did not argue further. He had learned that too. He gathered his files, thanked the council for their time in a voice that did not shake, and walked out of the chamber with his shoulders straight. It was only once the doors closed behind him, and he was alone in the long metal hallway that he let his breath out slow and let his hands curl into fists at his sides. He walked past wide windows that looked out over the stars, past alien traders haggling over crates of unknown goods, past a group of small blue-skinned children laughing as they chased each other around a fountain that sprayed glowing water instead of clear. Life went on here, easy and unbothered, while somewhere behind him, a piece of what belonged to his people had just been quietly taken away. He reached a private comm room near the docking bay, sealed the door, and sat down in front of the old terminal that connected back to Earth. It took a moment for the signal to steady across the distance. When the screen finally cleared, a woman with dark hair pulled back in a tight braid looked back at him. Her name was Maria Delgado, one of the sharpest minds in Earth's diplomatic office, and the only person on the council staff Danny trusted completely. "They took the system," he said, before she could even ask. Maria did not look surprised. That was the worst part. How did they explain it this time? Paperwork, technicalities, the same story dressed up in new words. Danny rubbed his eyes. "Maria, this is the 4th resource claim we've lost this year. Every time it's some small excuse. Every time it goes to someone with more seats at that table than we have." "I know," she said quietly. "Do the people back home know, really know?" Danny leaned closer to the screen. "Because from where I'm sitting, it feels like the council thinks we're something to be managed, not a species, a problem to keep quiet until it goes away." Maria was silent for a moment, and in that silence, Danny thought he saw something new in her eyes. Not surprise, not worry, something colder and steadier, like a decision that had already been made somewhere far above his rank. "They're testing us," she said finally. "Every claim they take, every rule they bend, it's a small test. They want to see how far they can push before we push back. And what happens when we don't push back? Then they push harder next time." Maria glanced away from the screen for a second, as if checking that the room around her was truly empty. "Danny, I can't tell you everything right now, but I need you to trust me when I say that Earth is not as helpless as they think we are. We have been patient because patience was the smart choice. That does not mean patience is the only choice we have." Danny sat back, turning her words over in his mind. He thought about the way Vale Ontrix had looked past him instead of at him, the way the whole chamber had spoken about Earth like a topic instead of a people. He thought about the ships he had seen only briefly on classified feeds, ships that did not match any public record of Earth's fleet, ships whose designs he was not supposed to know existed. "How long," he asked slowly, "have we been getting ready for this?" Maria's face did not change, but her silence answered the question louder than words could. Outside the comm room window, the stars sat still and endless, indifferent to the quiet storm gathering far behind them, back on a small blue world that the galaxy had decided was not worth watching closely. Danny stared out at that darkness for a long moment, feeling, for the first time since he had arrived at this station, something other than frustration. He felt the calm before a wave finally breaks, and somewhere deep down, in a place he did not fully understand yet, Danny Ruiz began to suspect that the Council's tests were about to get a very different kind of answer. The message came in the middle of the night, Earth time, though nothing about space truly followed the rhythm of day and night. It came as a short burst of code, then a longer file, then silence. By the time the file finished loading on the screens of Earth's Defense Council, everyone in the room already knew, from the way the operator's face had gone pale, that the news was bad. The colony ship named Horizon had been carrying 200 people, families who had signed up for a fresh start on a new world, engineers, teachers, doctors, and children who had never seen a planet other than Earth. The ship had no weapons. It had never needed any, because it was traveling through space that both Earth and the Galactic Council had marked as safe. It was gone now, torn apart in open space by a strike so fast and so precise that the ship's crew had barely managed to send a distress signal before the connection cut out for good. In a small house outside a quiet coastal town, a man named Caleb Whitfield sat alone at his kitchen table, with the television turned to a news channel that had not yet said the words out loud, though everyone watching already understood what the flashing red banner meant. His wife and his young daughter had been on that ship. They had gone ahead of him to prepare their new home, while he finished one last project at the shipyard where he worked as an engineer. He was supposed to join them in 3 months. He did not cry at first. He simply sat very still, staring at the screen, as if staring hard enough might change what it said. Word of the attack reached the Galactic Council within a day, carried by traders who had picked up fragments of the emergency broadcast. Earth's ambassadors demanded an investigation. They wanted to know who had fired on an unarmed ship in a protected zone, and they wanted answers fast. The answers, when they came, were worse than silence. The Council ruled the destruction of the Horizon an unfortunate accident, likely caused by a rare stretch of unstable space that Earth's outdated sensors had failed to detect. There would be no formal inquiry. There would be no search for whoever, or whatever, had fired the shot. The Council's decision was final, delivered in the same flat, uninterested tone that had dismissed Earth's resource claims for years. Danny Ruiz stood in the outpost chamber the day the ruling was read aloud, and for the first time since he had taken his post, he felt something close to rage rise up through his calm. He looked around the table at delegates who barely glanced up from their private screens as 200 human lives were reduced to an administrative footnote. He thought of the children on that ship. He thought of the families who would never get an answer. He said nothing in the chamber, but that night, he sent a message back to Maria Delgado that was far angrier than anything he had written before. Back on Earth, the mood was changing fast. What had once been quiet frustration, shared over dinner tables and late-night conversations, was hardening into something colder and more focused. People who had never paid much attention to politics were now watching every broadcast, every statement from the Defense Council, waiting to hear what Earth would do next. Caleb Whitfield did not wait to be told what to do. Within a week of the news, he had requested a transfer from his old shipyard job to a new, classified engineering division that had quietly begun recruiting some of Earth's best minds. He did not ask many questions about what the division actually built. He did not need to. Grief had cleared away every distraction in his life except one clear thought. He wanted to help build something strong enough that no other family would ever get a message like the one he had received. Maria Delgado met him on his first day at the new facility, a massive underground complex hidden beneath what had once been listed on public maps as an old mining site. She shook his hand and studied his face for a long moment, the way someone studies a person to see if they are ready for hard truths. "I am sorry about your family," she said simply. There was no false comfort in her voice, no empty promise that things would be all right, just plain, honest sympathy. "I don't want sympathy," Caleb said quietly. "I want to know what we're building here. I want to know if it's enough." Maria led him through a long hallway lined with sealed doors, each one guarded, each one hiding a piece of a puzzle that very few people on Earth were allowed to see in full. She stopped at the end of the hallway and placed her hand against a scanner. The door slid open, revealing a massive chamber where dozens of engineers moved between glowing screens and half-built machine parts that Caleb did not recognize from any public design he had ever studied. "For years," Maria said, "we let the council believe we were small, slow, harmless. We let them take what they wanted because fighting back too soon would have gotten us destroyed. But we never stopped preparing. Every insult, every stolen system, every unanswered attack, we noted it. We learned from it, and we built for the day when patience would no longer be the answer." Caleb stared out over the chamber at the quiet, focused energy of people working without rest, and felt something shift inside his grief. It did not go away. It never would, but now it had a direction. "Is that day here?" he asked. Maria's eyes were steady as she looked out over the same chamber. "Not yet," she said, "but it is close. And when it comes, the galaxy is not going to understand what hit them until it is far too late to matter." Outside, far above the hidden facility, the sky remained calm and blue, the same as it had always been. But underneath that calm sky, in rooms sealed away from prying eyes, the quiet work of an entire planet was building toward a storm that no council ruling could stop. Deep beneath the surface of Earth, in caverns that had once been carved out for mining operations decades ago, a different kind of digging was taking place. Instead of drills searching for metal and stone, engineers and scientists were building something the galaxy had never seen coming. The old mining tunnels had grown into a maze of shipyards, laboratories, and testing grounds, all hidden under layers of rock and false records that told the outside world nothing was down there but empty shafts. Nathan Cole walked through the largest of these shipyards with the steady, practiced steps of a man who had spent his whole life around machines built for war. He was not young anymore. Gray had crept into his hair years ago, and his hands carried the small scars of a career spent fixing things that others said could not be fixed. He had once served on Earth's early defense patrols, back when their ships were barely more than armed cargo haulers. Now he walked past hulls 3 times the size of anything he had commanded back then, their metal skin gleaming under bright work lights, swarming with engineers who moved with quiet urgency. "Test the stabilizers again," he called out to a nearby crew, his voice carrying easily across the open space of the yard. "I want zero drift before we even think about a launch." A woman's voice answered from somewhere above him, calm and focused. "Stabilizers reading steady, Commander. She's ready whenever you are." Nathan allowed himself a small, tired smile. Ready. It was a word that carried a lot of weight these days. Not far from the shipyard, in a smaller lab filled with humming machines and soft blue light, a scientist named Priya Malhotra stood in front of a wall of screens, watching numbers scroll past faster than most people could read. She had been working on one particular project for nearly 3 years, a stealth drive design based on old alien tech that Earth had managed to recover, study, and quietly improve far beyond what its original makers had ever imagined. "Run it one more time," she said to the technician beside her. "I want to see it vanish completely, not just fade." The technician nodded and triggered the test. On the main screen, a small model ship sitting inside a shielded chamber shimmered, flickered, and then disappeared entirely from every sensor readout in the room. Not hidden, not blurred, simply gone as if it had never existed at all. Priya let out a breath she had been holding. "That's it," she whispered. "That's exactly it." Word of successes like these traveled quietly through the underground network of facilities scattered across the planet, carried not through public broadcasts, but through careful, coded messages between people who had learned long ago how to keep a secret. Earth's shipyards were no longer building patrol boats and cargo haulers. They were building a fleet, one designed from the ground up to fight a war that Earth hoped it would never have to start, but had decided, after years of insults and one terrible loss, that it could no longer avoid preparing for. Caleb Whitfield had settled into his new role faster than anyone expected. Grief had sharpened his focus instead of dulling it, and within months, he had become one of the lead engineers responsible for the ship's weapon systems. He rarely spoke about his wife and daughter, but everyone in the facility understood, without needing to ask, exactly what drove him to work through the night more often than he slept. It was during one of those late nights that a message arrived that changed everything. The message came through a channel that should not have existed, routed through old trade networks and broken satellite relays, until it reached a private terminal deep inside the facility. When Maria Delgado decoded it, she found something she had not expected: a full confession, recorded by a soldier from the very faction responsible for destroying the Horizon. His name was Ezra Voss, a member of the Skarn Dominion, a faction that had grown bold under the quiet protection of certain council delegates who benefited from keeping Earth weak and distracted. Ezra had been part of the strike team that destroyed the colony's ship. He had followed orders without question at the time, believing the official story that the ship carried hidden weapons. It was only months later, after seeing classified reports that proved the ship had been completely unarmed, that the truth had finally broken something inside him. In his message, Ezra explained everything. The attack had not been an accident, nor a mistake caused by unstable space, as the Council had claimed. It had been a deliberate test, meant to see how Earth would react to losing innocent lives without any real answers. When Earth's response had been restrained silence instead of open war, the Skarn Dominion had grown confident that humanity could be pushed further and further without any real consequences. Ezra ended his message with a simple, desperate request. He wanted to help expose the truth, whatever the cost to himself. Maria brought the message straight to Earth's highest defense council, where Caleb, Nathan, and several other key leaders were gathered for a late-night briefing. The room fell silent as the recording played, Ezra's voice steady despite the danger he had clearly placed himself in by sending it. When it finished, no one spoke for a long moment. "We have proof," Caleb finally said, his voice tight but controlled. "We have someone willing to testify. We have everything we need to show the whole galaxy exactly what happened." Nathan folded his arms, studying the star map glowing on the table between them. "Proof means nothing to people who don't want to listen," he said. "The Council has ignored evidence before. They'll ignore it again, unless we make it impossible for them to look away." Maria nodded slowly, her eyes moving across the faces gathered around the table. "Then we stop asking them to listen," she said. "We show them." Within days, the underground facilities that had spent years quietly preparing began their final phase. Ships were fueled, crews were briefed, weapons systems, tested 100 times over, were armed and ready. Nathan Cole stood at the head of the largest shipyard, watching as the fleet, larger and more advanced than anything the galaxy believed Earth capable of building, prepared to leave its hidden home for the very first time. There were no speeches, no dramatic announcements, only the quiet, steady hum of engines coming to life, one by one, until the entire hidden fleet rose silently out of the depths of Earth and turned its course toward the stars, heading straight for the heart of scarred space. The age of quiet patience was ending. What came next, the galaxy would never see coming until it was already standing in front of them. The shipyard world of the Scarn Dominion had never known fear. For generations, it had sat safely under the quiet protection of council delegates who looked the other way in exchange for favors and resources. Its skis were guarded by rings of defense platforms. Its factories worked without pause to build ships for a faction that believed itself untouchable. No one on that world, from the highest commander to the lowest factory worker, expected the sky to ever turn against them. That belief lasted until the moment the sky tore open. There was no warning, no slow approach that defense sensors could track and prepare for. One moment the space above the shipyard world was empty, calm, and familiar. The next moment it was filled with human ships, hundreds of them, appearing all at once in perfect formation as if they had simply stepped out of nothing. Priya Malhotra's stealth drive had worked exactly as planned. On the bridge of the lead ship, Nathan Cole watched the enemy world spread out below him, its defense platforms scrambling too late to organize any real resistance. His voice was calm as he gave the order that hundreds of crews across the fleet had been waiting months to hear. "Target military infrastructure only," he said. "Shipyards, weapon platforms, command centers. Leave the civilian districts untouched. We are not here to repeat what they did to us." The order spread through the fleet in seconds, and then the sky above the shipyard world lit up with precise, controlled fire. Weapon platforms that had stood for decades crumbled under strikes that never once strayed toward the homes and streets nearby. It was not the chaos the Scarn Dominion had expected from an enemy driven by grief and anger. It was something colder and far more frightening: total control. Down on the surface, panic spread through command centers as officers tried desperately to understand what kind of enemy could strike with such overwhelming force while showing such careful restraint. Reports flooded in of ships that could not be tracked until they were already firing, weapons that tore through shielding meant to withstand any known attack, and a level of coordination that suggested years, not months, of preparation. Caleb Whitfield sat in the weapons station of one of the strike ships, his eyes fixed on a single target marked on his screen, the flagship that had once led the attack on the horizon. He had studied every detail of that ship's design for months, memorizing its weak points the way another person might memorize a photograph they could not bear to forget. When the order came to engage the flagship directly, Caleb's hands were steady despite the storm inside him. "Locking on," he said quietly. The flagship tried to flee, its engines flaring as it attempted to break through the human formation surrounding it. It did not get far. Caleb's strike hit exactly where he had planned, tearing through the ship's core systems in a single devastating blow. The flagship broke apart in silence, without dramatic explosion, simply crumbling into scattered wreckage that drifted outward into the dark. For a long moment, Caleb said nothing. He thought of his wife, of his daughter, of the message he had once received in the middle of the night that had changed the entire shape of his life. He did not feel triumphant. He felt only a quiet, heavy relief, the kind that comes when a debt long owed has finally been paid, even though nothing it buys back can ever truly return what was lost. While the battle raged above the shipyard world, another part of Earth's plan was unfolding far across the galaxy. Ezra Voss, the Scarn soldier who had risked everything to expose the truth, activated a signal he had spent months preparing in secret. The moment Earth's fleet engaged the shipyard world, his signal went out, carrying with it every piece of evidence proving the deliberate destruction of the horizon, every recording, every confession, sent simultaneously to every allied and neutral species connected to the Council network. There was no way to stop it, No way to bury it in quiet rulings or dismissive paperwork. The truth reached every corner of known space at once, arriving alongside footage of Earth's fleet fighting with a precision and restraint that stunned every species watching. This was not the desperate, chaotic revenge of a wounded animal. This was the calculated response of a civilization that had been holding back its true strength the entire time. Within hours, word reached the shipyard world's remaining command staff that their council protection had collapsed under the weight of public outrage. Delegates who had once shielded the Skarn Dominion from consequences were now scrambling to distance themselves, terrified of being connected to a scandal that had shaken every corner of the galaxy at once. Facing a fleet they could not defeat and a truth they could no longer hide, the Skarn Dominion's leadership made the only choice left to them. A trembling voice crackled across every open channel, requesting an immediate ceasefire and offering full surrender. Nathan Cole received the message on the bridge of his ship, reading it twice before allowing himself to believe it was real. Around him, the crew fell quiet, watching him for a reaction. "Cease all offensive fire," he ordered. "Hold position. Confirm the surrender terms before anyone lowers their guard." The order rippled through the fleet, and one by one, the human ships stopped their advance, hovering silently above a world that had once believed itself untouchable and now understood, in the space of a single day, exactly how wrong that belief had been. Word of the victory reached Earth within hours, carried across the same hidden channels that had once carried only warnings and quiet preparation. For the first time in years, the mood across the planet shifted from tense waiting to something closer to disbelief. Not celebration exactly, not yet, but a heavy, stunned realization that the quiet species the galaxy had underestimated for so long had just proven, in the clearest way possible, that its patience had never once been weakness. Maria Delgado watched the reports come in from her office, her expression unreadable as she read through casualty numbers that were, remarkably, almost entirely limited to military targets. She thought of every insult absorbed, every stolen resource, every unanswered attack that had led to this single, overwhelming moment. "They wanted to see what we were capable of," she murmured to herself. "Now they know." Far above the shipyard world, Earth's fleet held its position, steady and silent, a quiet and undeniable message to the rest of the galaxy that the era of dismissing humanity was finally, completely over. The Galactic Council chamber had stood for centuries as the beating heart of political power in known space. Its walls had witnessed countless debates, treaties, threats, and quiet betrayals, all delivered with the same practiced calm that came from believing nothing could truly shake the order of things. That belief was about to be tested in a way the chamber had never faced before. Danny Ruiz walked through its grand doors with a steadiness in his steps that had not been there the first time he entered this room. 3 years ago, he had sat at the edge of this power, listening to himself be dismissed. Today, he walked toward the center of it, and for the first time, every set of eyes in the chamber turned to follow him. He was not alone. Behind him walked a small group of Earth's representatives, carrying nothing more threatening than a single data drive and a quiet, unshakable confidence that had never been part of Earth's presence in this room before. Vale Antrix sat in his usual seat, his silver-gray face carefully composed, though Danny could see the tension held tightly behind his stone-colored eyes. News of the shipyard world's fall had already reached every corner of the council, along with the recordings Ezra Voss had released to the entire galaxy. There was no pretending, this time, that Earth could be spoken over or quietly dismissed. "You have caused quite a disruption," Vale said, his voice measured, though it lacked the easy confidence it once carried. "The Council will need a full explanation for this act of aggression." Danny placed the data drive on the table in front of him, the small object looking almost too simple for the weight of what it carried. "You'll have your explanation," he said. "All of it, starting with the truth about what really happened to the Horizon." He activated the drive, and the chamber's massive central display filled with the recording Ezra Voss had captured months earlier. The confession detailing exactly how the colony ship had been deliberately destroyed as a test, and exactly how certain council delegates had known the truth from the very beginning and chosen silence instead of justice. The chamber, usually filled with soft murmurs and constant motion, went completely still. Delegates who had once looked past Danny now stared directly at him, their expressions shifting from shock to something closer to fear as the full weight of what Earth had uncovered became clear. There was no way to argue against video evidence broadcast to every species connected to the Council network. No clever wording, no technicality, could undo what the entire galaxy had already seen with its own eyes. For years, Danny said, his voice steady and calm despite the storm of emotion beneath it, Earth was treated as something small, something to be managed, dismissed, and quietly taken advantage of. We watched our resources stripped away under technicalities. We watched our people killed and our grief turned into an administrative footnote. And through it all, we said nothing, because we believed patience was the wiser path. He paused, letting his eyes move slowly across the chamber, meeting the gaze of every delegate who had once refused to meet his. That patience, he continued, was never weakness, it was restraint, and restraint has a limit. Vale opened his mouth to respond, but for the first time since Danny had known him, no smooth, practiced words came out. There was nothing left to say that could undo the truth now sitting in front of the entire galaxy. On the massive display beside the confession recording, a new image appeared, footage of Earth's fleet, hundreds of ships strong, more advanced than anything the Council races had believed a young species capable of building. It was not shown as a threat, but simply as a fact, a quiet demonstration of exactly how much capability humanity had chosen to hide rather than display. "We are not here today to declare war," Danny said. "We proved, quite clearly, that we could. What we are here to declare is something simpler. Earth will no longer accept being spoken over, dismissed, or quietly taken advantage of. We will not seek unearned power. We will not threaten those who deal with us honestly. But we will also no longer stay silent while our people are harmed and our voice is ignored." He let the silence stretch, allowing the weight of his words to settle fully across the chamber before he spoke again. "You once told me that recognition must be earned," he said, looking directly at Vale. "I would say we have earned it." No one in the chamber spoke. Not the delegates who had once dismissed Earth's claims, not the allies who had quietly watched injustice unfold without protest, not even Vale himself, who sat frozen, his carefully built confidence completely gone. For the first time in the Council's long history, the room that had witnessed the rise and fall of a dozen powerful species sat in absolute, stunned silence, unable to find a single word worthy of the moment. Far above the crown world, holding steady at the edge of Council space, Earth's fleet waited in quiet formation. Nathan Cole stood on the bridge of the lead ship, watching the stars with the calm patience of a man who understood that true strength rarely needed to shout. Beside him, Caleb Whitfield looked out at the same view, a quiet peace finally beginning to settle over the grief he still carried, knowing that the truth had finally been heard, even if it could never bring back what he had lost. Back on Earth, people gathered around screens in homes, offices, and public squares, watching history unfold in near silence, aware that the world their children would grow up in had just changed in ways too large to fully understand yet. In the days that followed, other overlooked species, ones who had also learned to endure quiet unfairness from the Council, began reaching out to Earth in careful, curious messages. They had watched what happened. They had seen a small, dismissed species stand up not with blind rage, but with proof, precision, and restraint, and they wondered, quietly, what else humanity might be capable of. Maria Delgado, reading through the growing list of new messages arriving from distant, hopeful corners of the galaxy, allowed herself a small, tired smile. The age of being overlooked was over. What came next would be shaped not by fear, but by the simple truth Earth had finally proven beyond any doubt. Some quiet things, once pushed too far, become forces the galaxy would never forget.